from Nashville, Tennessee. It's time for another episode of Tips, Tactics, and Tools for a Safer Tomorrow, where all things related to your safety and security are discussed, detailed, and delivered to you. You may leave with a tip that saves you money or a tactic that saves your life. So here are your hosts, owner and founder of Defense Systems, Brink Fiddler, and owner and operator of Herring Technology, Tom Herring.
Hey guys, welcome to this edition of Tips, Tactics, and Tools for a Safer Tomorrow. I'm one of your hosts, Brink Fiddler, owner and founder of Defense Systems out of Nashville, Tennessee. With me, as always, my co-host, owner and operator of Herring Technology, Tom Herring. So most of you guys know, if you listen to this, you're at least familiar with us or Herring Technology 1 and kind of what we do and what we bring to this space. And you know, we're all over the place as far as what we talk about, but it's always related to safety and security for people and living more safely in what we call a dangerously developing world. So this is a continuation episode, if you will, on the series that we're doing on the Covenant School shooting that occurred here in Nashville on March 27, 2023. I'm super excited and honored today to have a friend with us. We're not going to use her name. Her identity is going to remain anonymous. But she was employed as a teacher on March 27th, 2023 at the Covenant School, and took her a long time to decide to do this, which I understand quite a bit. But I think ultimately what she shared with me off air, and I doubt she'll brag on herself, so I will, was that she feels like that if this could help somebody else, then that's why she's here to do it. One other thing I'll brag on her about, because she won't, is that part of the anonymity is that she wants the community, i.e. the March 27th community, to understand that this is not about her, and she doesn't want to make it about her. She wants to make it about helping other people and healing, and potentially that may go through something again. So all very honorable things, again, that I know you would not brag on yourself off air or on air about, but I wanted to brag on you for just a minute. So welcome, first of all. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yep. I know this was a heavy lift for you to get here, but I think it's awesome that you are, and I think this is going to really help a lot of people to hear.
I hope it will.
Yeah. So a little bit of background where we can also protect your identity, though. So obviously, I already mentioned you were employed as a teacher on March 27, 2023. But how long had you been teaching? Well, and you're still technically teaching a little bit?
A little bit,
okay.
Yeah.
So how long have you been an early education teacher?
So I went into teaching straight out of college. I taught for about 6 years. Then I started a family and did the stay-at-home mom thing for, almost 10 years. And then when my youngest started in kindergarten, I started to get back into teaching and ended up working full-time. So my first job back was at Covenant.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long had you been at Covenant?
That was my third year at Covenant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you want to say what grade, or you want to avoid?
Well, I started off as a floater and then ended up working as a lead teacher in the preschool.
Okay, got it. So obviously, if you started right out of college, you knew what you wanted to do.
Right.
Yeah. So did you, what age did you decide you wanted to be a teacher? Do you remember?
I always loved school. I was
So
one of those
weird.
kids that wanted to be there. And I like kids, and it's just been a great experience for me.
That's my daughter. She loves school. Like, she was sick, and she's like, but I got 2 tests. I can't miss them. I'm like, yes, you can.
I never was sick, only when there was a test.
Right. Yeah, I get the feeling. So that's awesome. I mean, obviously it's your calling if you knew kind of all along. Like, I knew that I knew I wanted to do something. I didn't necessarily know law enforcement like as a kid, but I would say by 14, I knew I wanted to do something to help people. I just didn't know that meant like paramedic or whatever. But I decided on law enforcement at 13. And so it's so funny to me that like you and I knew early on, and then I talked to some people that go to college and they're like, yeah, I don't know what I want to do. I'm like, how do you not have any idea what you want to do at this point in life? But I guess we're all wired different, which is awesome. So, anyway, how long had you been a lead?
That was my second year.
Okay.
As a lead teacher.
Same classroom?
Same classroom, yeah. Okay.
So comfortable. Well, if you'd been a floater, you were probably pretty comfortable.
I was
already.
Pretty comfortable. I learned the building my first year because it's a very confusing building. So that was a blessing, was kind of figuring out where all the ins and outs were.
Yeah.
And got to know all the kids, which was great.
Yeah. Well, and people that aren't familiar with the building, and I don't want to get too much into it for obvious reasons, right? But it's, and I think most people that are going to listen to this episode will know this already. It's a church and a school,
right,
together. Like
Yes.
there's, prior to the event, there was no real
There was no separation.
Yeah. And so Tom's I can't get into any more detail than this. Tom's very familiar with the building as well.
Okay.
And kind of what the before and after, if you will, from a security standpoint. But to your point, that getting familiar with the building, and we'll get there eventually, but ended up being really important. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine, if you're a sub who hadn't been there much, or, how different maybe that experience would have been.
Right. I can't imagine.
Yeah. For an environment like that. 'Cause it's confusing. I remember walking it the first time, with, Katherine and Ben, actually, when they reached out, and, I thought, wow, maze,
It's amazing.
it's beautiful. It's
Yes.
it's an incredibly good looking building, and it's a cool place, but it could be obviously, problematic. So, how many kids? I don't even know. I mean, how many? Because a lot of your classes are doubled up, right? Like you have like 2 3rd grade, 2 4th grade.
Right.
Like, is it the
right.
same?
Most
for the
of them are that way. The preschool was that way.
Okay. So, you had 2. Well, how many pre-Ks are there? Is there more than one?
Well, there's they go by different age groups. So there's
Okay.
a 3s, a 4s, a pre-K 5s, and then you go into kindergarten.
Okay. And you had
4s.
I'm trying to remember from talking to Edison,
Yeah.
actually, about how old the kiddos were, and how many per class.
So there are laws in the state of how many kids you can have with one teacher. So
Makes sense.
the limit was 9 for us.
Okay.
But I think I had 9 and the other teacher had 8.
Okay. Well, yeah, probably at 4. That's probably
Yeah.
That's probably plenty.
It's only so much you can handle at that age alone. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd lean towards like 2. If we're talking about 4-year-olds, but 9. Yeah, you got to have the patience of Job then.
Right.
But it's also where your heart is. So I talk all the
Yes.
time about having the heart of a teacher, and that's what I mean. Like,
Right.
because we teach at preschools a lot, and we'll talk about how evacuating like 2-year-olds is really cute, but it's not super effective, and half the teachers will be shaking their head like, no, it's not cute, like because they get so
Yeah.
frustrated about it. I'm like, okay, maybe for an outsider that doesn't have to deal with that every day,
Right,
it's cute
right.
to watch, but it doesn't work. Is my
Right.
point. That's when we amend our training a little bit, is for that. So, all right, cool. So that sets background anyway. So I want to get into the day of the event, and however much you remember, don't want to go there. If there's stuff you don't want to talk about, then just tell me. I mean, by all
Okay.
means. I told you before we started that this is just very conversational and open. So a lot of people do and some people don't, but do you kind of remember the start of that day for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's start there.
Okay. Well, March 27th was actually a really beautiful day. It was kind of the first warm day we had. It was a really cold spring break that year, and I think it was about 75 degrees. So the other teacher and I, for some reason, we only had 3 kids in our class, each of us, which is really strange. We're like, this is so weird. Where is everybody? And I guess they were out for various reasons. And we were like, this is such a nice day. Like, we should co-teach, and we should maybe take them outside a lot today. So that was kind of our thought. And then we had our normal morning routine. And then at 10,
What is it normal? I'm just curious.
I mean, you come in, they unpack, they put away their things. You do a morning meeting. We have a chapel, but we don't take the younger kids to chapel. We get together as a group for praise and worship. So we did that.
Cool.
And then, they have their morning snack. You do a lesson, and then it was time for their specials. And that day they had PE together in the gym.
Okay.
So at 10 o'clock, I took them to the gym. We were getting ready for parent-teacher conferences that Wednesday.
Okay.
So I had a lot of work to do, and I sent a bunch of stuff to the printer. I remember dropping them off. I remember going to the printer, getting all the stuff I needed, getting back to my classroom, and kind of just spreading it all out on my table and sorting through
Okay.
the different things I needed that week. I always had a habit of keeping my classroom door closed and locked when the kids were in the room, but when they left, I took that as an opportunity to kind of air out some germs and had it propped open, get some fresh air in there.
Reality of teaching.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as I'm sitting there, I heard the first gunshot, and I knew it was a gunshot. And I jumped up and ran to my door to lock it. But then my brain said, well, there's been a lot of our building was under construction for a few months. It had flooded that winter. It was really cold. We had a really big freeze, and I could think a pipe burst. So they had to redo what they call the fellowship hall.
Mm-hmm.
So it had been under construction. So it wasn't unusual to hear like sledgehammers or banging so even though my body said that's a gunshot, like run to your door and lock it, my brain was still like, oh, but there's a lot of construction in the building. It's probably construction. So I stepped out and realized, okay, no, that's coming from one side of the building and the construction's on the complete opposite side of the building.
Okay.
So as I'm sitting there listening to this and still trying to think, okay, but why would someone be shooting? Because the sound moved from outside the building to inside the building. And honestly, if it wasn't for Brink's training, I wouldn't have known what a shotgun sounded like inside of a building. Like I had no idea.
Maybe everybody doesn't know that will listen to this. So just to clarify why. So I think we're unique in that, but the live fire exercise we do at the end of training is so that people can hear gunshots in buildings, because gunshots in buildings don't sound anything like you think it will. It's not like it sounds outside. It's not. People are like, oh, gun range. I'm like, it depends on where you are. So you had obviously experienced a rifle and a pistol and what those sound like in a building, because we do both always, because they're very different sounding. And as it turns out, that day it was a rifle. But I want to back up too just a second. I didn't want to cut you off, but you could tell obviously the difference when it was outside versus inside, just because of the amount of layers between you and the initial shots versus the second volley. There's much fewer layers, right? So anyway, just to clarify for people, that's
well. And I grew up with in a hunting family, so I had heard gunshots outside. I had never been to a gun range. I had never heard it inside of a building, so it's completely different. It sounds nothing alike.
I want to ask, because Brink, sometimes this is in your training, because you do the live fire, sometimes groups will respond back or controversial of that's traumatizing. That's, why do you do that? And there's companies that will not do it, and then ones that will. You were there. You had that training before you heard. Can you explain? How did you feel during the training portion of that? And then how did it play out?
So during the training portion, I was kind of like, okay, this sounds like a sledgehammer hitting a wall. And then during the actual event, it was like, okay, this sounds just like the training. But hearing that saved my life. Like I wouldn't be here. I probably would have gone down to investigate, oh, what's that sound? Who's banging on a wall down there? But if it wasn't for that training, I wouldn't have known how to react when I heard it.
Wow.
That's pretty strong. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
So there's a reason we do it at the end too, right? You can imagine the response out of a group of teachers if I walk in and start with that. Like I can't, and that's the thing. We talk about it all the time about knowing your audience, and that was a struggle for me when I got started doing this. At first was like, I have to learn my audience. Like I can't put the teachers and everyday people under the same stress that I'm going to do to a cop or a soldier, right? It's a whole different way I got to reach you, to get you. And the reason we do it at the very end is because we get to Tom's point. We get pushback sometimes from people like, I don't know, like I don't think it might be too much, all the things. And we say, okay, and we always bring the stuff to do it though. And inevitably, by the end, by the time you learn all the stuff you learn and how they didn't hear it in a 3-story building and all the stuff, everybody wants to hear it. And it can be, every once in a while we have tears, and the teachers that do tell me say, it's not, it's just the emotional part of hearing that in this place.
Right.
But thank God I've heard that now. And,
right.
So just for people to understand, like you can imagine, especially as a person that's been through you've been through it a couple of times now. You went through it recently, the training again, but why it's at the end. Like it's not, we can't lead with that. It's got to be the very last thing we do to get you like, this may be tough, but I really need to hear this.
Right.
And I think that's probably where y'all were. I don't know if you remember when some of the first time I did it, and I won't say where I did it. I know you remember. I was right near somebody's desk that I caked in dust and gunshot residue by accident. So sorry, you know who you are. I didn't think about it at the time, but there were people that didn't hear it the first time, and we had to move them. Mm-hmm. They didn't hear, literally heard nothing, and it was in that building.
Yeah.
And again, I won't say where, but if just in an area where you would think everybody would hear it.
Right.
And they didn't. So anyway, sorry. I digress. So back to your thought process. You're at this point, are you at the threshold of your classroom door? Is that fair, or where?
No, I've stepped out into the hall at this point.
Okay.
Which probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, but I was trying to figure out, is this real? Is this not real? So when I started to hear the shots inside, my brain knew this is exactly the way it sounded in training. This is real. But then I thought, well, maybe this is Brink. Like maybe this is a live action drill, because it had been a year and I just thought he's very into what he does. And I thought, I would not put it past this man to come back and do a live action drill and see if we all pass the test. So I'm thinking, I better pass the test. I better run back, lock my door, get in my hard corner, do all the things I'm supposed to do. And as I'm locking the door and reaching up to pull the shade, the fire alarm went off. And that's the thing in my mind that clicked, that said, this isn't a drill. This is real.
Yeah, it's, interesting. We were in Memphis the day that it happened. We were at another school doing an assessment. And I remember that night being in the hotel room, and some of the first footage started to come out, like the surveillance footage, and I saw, you can't see the actual like fixture itself on the wall, like the strobe light, but you can see the light flashing obviously from a strobe, right? And as soon as I saw it, I knew what had happened, because that's happened to me. There's a couple places you'd think I'd only do it once and learn my mistake, but you had told that story as you were setting up our demonstration. Yeah. You were out in an open area and you were showing us, this is the bullet catcher, these are the guns I'm going to shoot. And then you said, I better be careful though, because if I shoot it under a smoke sensor, I'll set the fire alarm off. So I knew at that moment that person had set off the fire alarm, and I was like, Brink wouldn't do that, because he told us he wouldn't shoot his gun under one of the smoke sensors. That happened to me. I won't say what school, but it's a school that brings us in every year. They're every year. We don't do the same thing for them every year, but they are that adamant about it. And it was the second year I was training them. You'll know the school. I'm just not going to say it. And they picked the spot. They're like, all right, this year I want you to shoot right here. I'm like, great. And I didn't bother looking up. I was just like, whatever. Customer's always right. And the facilities person had started off in the training and then had to leave for some issue. So he missed the part about all this. So he's down in facilities, and the fire alarm goes off because I'm right under a freaking smoke detector, and he comes running up freaking out. And of course, I'm standing there, and we're all standing there like, what's going on? We're like, well, you left. Otherwise, you'd know what's happening right now. So anyway, that's how I knew, like, I knew immediately what had happened when I just saw the strobe going off. So anyway, back to, so as soon as you heard, you're in your room at this point.
Yes, still. I'm in my room, locked the door, in my hard corner.
Yep.
And then your mind just starts to go through what you can do. Because I didn't have my kids, so I was like, okay, how can I help as many people as possible at this point? My first thought was, I have a child in the building upstairs in another classroom. Can I make it to her classroom and lock them down safely? And I knew that person was somewhere out there roaming between me and that classroom. So that was, no, you can't do that. And then my second thing, this is really weird, but I was like, maybe there's a panic button in this room that nobody told me about. So I'm looking up like where the fire alarm went off, trying to figure out like, is there some sort of button I can push? And there was not. So then my third option was I grabbed my cell phone. We shared a Jack and Jill closet, me and the other 4-year-old teacher. So I peeked through the closet to tell her, hey, we got to go. And I thought nobody else knew what this was, so they're going to think it's a fire alarm, and I'm going to try to save as many kids as I possibly can. So I knew the 3-year-old class was going to come out near my class. My classroom had a back door in it, and I knew they'd come out next to that door.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, I can at least save them and just like, hey, we got to run. Like, this is not a fire drill. And then I realized that the 2 5-year-old classes were going to come up out at a door ahead of me. So I stepped all the way out to the sidewalk. And at that moment, I thought, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done, because I'm standing in this sidewalk, nothing around me. If I turn around, there's windows all behind me. And so I just started thinking, okay, what if they call a lockdown and I'm waiting out here for these kids? I should, give myself a certain amount of time. If they don't come, then I should run around a corner and call 911.
Yeah.
And as I'm waiting for them to come out, I hear the PE coach yell, keep running. And I look down at the parking lot, and the kids are so small that I can't see them down the hill, but I see these like pool noodles just going up and down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my class. Like, I got to go be with them. And this is good, because if they come out for a fire drill, they're all coming this way. So we can just get all of these classes and go off the hill on the Burton Hills side.
Yeah.
So that was the plan.
Okay. For me, because I know the floor plan and the audience won't, and it's just more of a curiosity thing for me. So if I step out your classroom door, where are the threes that you were talking about? Where are they?
So they're going to come out of a door that's underneath a stairwell.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the 2 5-year-old classes are going to come out in the main entrance doors.
Got it. Okay.
So I think, I can just catch them all.
Yeah, right there where your door is.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Okay.
And then clarification that they're leaving because there's a fire drill.
They think it's a fire drill, because
Correct.
I noticed when as teachers, we would always, like, if we smelled, like if someone left a laminator on and it smelled like burning in the halls, like we'd poke our heads out of our doors, like, do y'all smell that burning? What is that?
Yeah.
But when the shooting was happening and I was out in the hall, I was like, no one's poking their head out their door. No one's peeking around the corner. And in their defense, like if I had my kids in my classroom and there was noise and music and songs, I probably wouldn't have heard it either.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
That's definitely reality, because when is a school ever quiet?
Right.
And even that age, unless it's nap time, but just with one door, you've experienced it, just with one door closed, it's, and that plays into later on, which we'll get into, but how certain decisions were made. And there was so much that it wasn't heard. So the other teacher that you poked your head, like, what was she with you at this point, or I poked my head into her classroom to grab her, and she was not in her room. Okay.
So I made the decision to just go out and wait and get as many kids as I could.
Okay. And then I know where you, I know where you're talking about. I think where you stepped outside, obviously to be able to see what you saw, and then go to join up with them. So that's what you did next.
Right. So I see them, and I run towards my class, and as I approach the coach, he just starts saying, "It's real. It's a man. He's wearing camouflage. He's got a red hat, and he's got a really big gun." And I just said, I know, I heard it. And then he looked at me and he goes, you have your cell phone. Because as I'm running up to him, he's flagging a car down and asking the people in that car to call 911. So he had already flagged them down as I'm running to approach him. And I'm like, oh, I do. I have my cell phone. So I open my phone up, and we have an emergency text thread. And the rule is, in an emergency, you roll call. So I opened up the thread, and I'm probably the first person in that thread. I just say that my class and the other class were here. And then I close the thread, and I immediately call my husband, who lives nearby. And I'm like, hey, there's an active shooter in our school. Like, you need to get here now, because I need to get as many kids as possible off this hill. And then I hang up the phone and I turn around and none of the classes are out. So I'm hoping that, okay, they probably are locked down. That's good. But I was also upset because I was like, we only got 6 kids out. Like, I wish we had gotten more kids out of that building. So that was kind of an upsetting moment for me. That's
the teacher in you, that's the mom in you, right? Like all the things, but and that's the emotion side of it, but the logic side of it is you did exactly what you were supposed to do, and I'll never forget, and we'll get to Katherine and kind of all that here in a little while, but I don't know if you remember this or not, but at the end of the training, she said out loud to the whole group, she's like, okay, that was for y'all. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I was like, no, Katherine, you're not. No, you're not. There's a freaking door right by your office. Like, no, you're not. But again, that's the emotion side, that wants you to do those things. But I want you to keep going because I know this part of the story, but I found it really interesting how everything started to play out. So you realize that, but you also realize, I guess you and the coach realize, okay, we can't just. Another interesting fact, I don't remember if I told you this or not. So I ran into the coach, and we won't say his name, but at the grocery store one night, and we were just unpacking this thing, and the car he flagged down ends up being our second 911 caller.
Okay.
So, and he said, I remember thinking, I'm either flagging down the car that just dropped this person off or somebody's going to help. Like, how do you, and you got 4-year-olds with, like, how do you, that's a lot.
And when you say help, you mean bad help, not good help.
Right. I mean, like, you don't know who is in the car that's coming down the hill. Is it a church member? Is it, who knows? So, interesting fact, and we talk about this in our training now about why you need to know the numerical address of where you work.
Yes.
Because that ended up causing a 47-second delay on that second call because the caller, whoever the coach was talking to, just kept saying active shooter covenant school, active shooter covenant school. And the dispatcher keeps saying, what's the address, sir? What's the address? What's the address? What's the address? Thankfully, it was our second call.
Okay.
Because that first one generates the kind of call for service, if you will. That's like starts going out to the guys to start coming. But had it been the first call,
or the only call,
47-second delay is a long time. So that's who that ended up being was our second 911 caller, which is thankful. But that's I mean, all this happens too. I think for people listening, it seems like at this point a lot's happened in a very short amount of time.
Right. It's really fast.
Yeah. I mean, you and I were talking beforehand. Shooter shot her way in at 10:11. Your call to your husband based on your call log was 10:13. Mm-hmm. So 2 minutes or less.
2 minutes,
potentially. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's 2 minutes. You've just sit here, it's 20 minutes in, and you are unpacking this of all these decisions. What people in reality do not understand is all of that was in 2 minutes. All of these decisions you were making, do this, don't do this, is that, is in that little bitty fraction of time.
Right.
And so the preparedness part,
it's so important. Yeah.
It speeds all of that up. Mm-hmm. It's just blowing my mind, all these thoughts that you were going through as a teacher. And I almost describe it as your brain just goes from like a normal computer to a quantum computer all of a sudden. Like you're just thinking things so fast. It's very interesting.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. We talked off air, if you will, before we started today about when you first told me that about it's got to be Brink, and then like, no, wait a minute, that can't be, and all those things. I was talking to Gloria, who's on our team, and she's like, well, that's exactly what Amanda Ripley talks about in her book. That's denial, deliberation, and decisive action playing out in real time. Right. You were in denial at first. Mm-hmm. No, wait a minute. Construction? No. Brink? Yeah. No, wait a minute. Denial, deliberate, and then you move through that process super fast. Right. And interestingly, that's what Amanda Ripley's book talks about is this, when she did that study, is the people that move through that process the fastest are the ones that survive and less injured. Right. So it's very real. Even with training, you can still potentially go through all that stuff, but how fast it plays out. So we're literally 2 minutes in.
Yeah.
And I'll be interested to see. We'll look at it when we take a break or we get done. I've got the text thread.
Okay.
So I'll be interested to see, where in that you're talking about. But you hang up with him, you realize, okay, well, I wanted to get more, but I don't. But I do. I'm here with this coach, and we have these. Right. And you were at that point. Were y'all still on the drive? Like.
Yes, we were still like making our way
down that road.
And then so he's at the car describing what the shooter's wearing, telling the dispatcher they're wearing camouflage, they have a red hat, it's a really big gun, all of these things. And then as he's doing that, I go back into the emergency text thread. I open it back up on my phone, and I start to see a text come through from my daughter's teacher, and it says that the shooter's shooting into their classroom. And at that point, I felt really oddly comforted by that, because I thought, if they're shooting into the classroom, that means that they're behind a locked door, and that's a good thing.
Yep.
But I didn't know how long the door was gonna stay locked. Like, how fast can this person breach this door? Is that possible? I know in Brink's training, that's kind of what they teach you, like, get your kids behind you and then get ready for them to come through the thresholds and you attack them. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, like, how long is this door going to hold? How soon is the shooter going to get inside this classroom? So I start to yell at the coach, tell them to go on the second floor. The classroom's facing Harding. And he was like, you come over and tell them. So I run over to the car. He takes the kids. And I start to tell them the shooter's on the second floor, the south side of the building. They need to get to the classrooms on the second floor. The classroom's facing Harding Pike. So I'm trying to get them not just to come to the hill, but to get in the building and to get to the exact location where it is.
So are the police there at this time?
No.
Or still not? Okay.
No.
She's on the phone with dispatch.
Dispatch. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Were you talking via the people in the vehicle, or were you on your phone?
No, it was their car.
Yeah.
It was their phone through their car. So we were like leaning into the car window to kind of talk to the dispatcher. And then the dispatcher, something in my brain was like, you need to describe. I didn't know if they believed us because they were so calm. And I was like, you need to describe what you're seeing. So I turn around and I tell them, I'm here with 6 4-year-olds. Like, I have 6 4-year-olds. We're safe. And then they say, well, you said you have 6 kids. How many kids are in the building? And I said, close to 200. And then they said, okay. And then at some point after that, they said, okay, well, we're going to hang up now because the police officer's there. And I'm looking around like, there's no cop here. I don't know why they're hanging up with me right now. But they hung up the phone. I remember the older couple in their car. The man looked at me and said, what should I do? And I said, you need to get your wife somewhere safe. And so they drove away, and I ran into the woods with the kids. And we hid the kids in the woods until my husband came.
Well, I can explain the dispatcher. So I'm sure that makes you curious. What we talked about off air of Collazo being the first one there, there wasn't anybody there at that point. There was an officer that checked what's called 97, checked on scene. Was at the wrong building.
Oh, okay.
He was at the office building that's right down that
Next
drive.
to us.
Yep.
Okay.
But he tells dispatch, I'm 97, so everybody listening to the radio thinks, okay, there's an officer on scene, including the dispatcher.
Right.
And he thought he was too.
Right.
Just wasn't.
Wrong place. Okay.
Yep, wrong place. So that's what caused the confusion, and that's why she hung up. To potentially take more calls is pretty common too.
Right.
If there's information coming in from inside the building,
Yes,
they need to get those calls.
They do.
But that's just a really good example of like, we train for this, but the reality is like it never, like it just
right.
It never goes to plan, and that's an excellent example. I mean, that officer didn't check on scene at the wrong place on purpose. Like it's like
Right.
It's just like the police audio from and you've been through it recently. So in Vegas, when they're calling out all this stuff and it's all wrong. Well, nobody's doing that on purpose. It's just the way these things happen.
I was going to say, it's even just say we can go to every single one of them, and there's misinformation that's coming in because it's such a fast process that's going on. It's not intentional by any stretch. So.
Yeah. Yep. So, which side, just for me, as you're headed down the hill, which side of the woods y'all going on the left or the right as you're going down the hill?
Right. So, as far away as we can possibly get.
Yeah, but out of sight.
Out of sight.
Yep.
And thankfully it was kind of like today, like the leaves weren't on the trees, but there was leaves on the brush again. And I remember just thank you God that there are leaves on this brush. But
I want people to understand. You're a teacher. Your students are there. You care about them. You're out of the building at this point. I want to make sure everybody understands. While you're there, your child is still in there, and this is going on.
Yes.
So I don't want to make sure that doesn't get lost with the audience. That
right.
Yeah, that's two, but two different avenues of fear, if you will, but very same part of the brain, right? Like, because the nurturer and in you, right, that made you want to be a teacher, a lot of the similar instinct of, I guess, being a mom. I'm not a mom, but I would imagine.
Yes.
So while you're, like Tom said, your own child's in the building, the relationship you develop with these kids, like, these are your kids,
right?
Like they're like, it's got to be a very, I don't know. It's very, I don't know how you brain even. Yeah, I don't know. You told me.
I think part of that has to do with your faith, because it's like, okay, these aren't my kids, they're God's kids. And, it's kind of like, okay, God, she's in your hands. Like, I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Whatever happens. It's your will. And, she's yours.
That's strong faith.
And as parents, we do that every day.
Right.
We're not in control of them when they're not with us. But
well, I have a 16-year-old, so when they're driving on their own, it's the same thing. Like, okay, God, they're yours.
Yeah.
Keep them safe.
That ultimate power is where the control is.
Right.
So that's,
amen. Well said. You told me an interesting side note previously about once y'all got into the woods, what you ran into, and then what you guys talked through with the plan there.
Okay, so we get into the woods, and the first thing I do is text my family. I sent them 4 texts. The first one said, active shooter in the building. The second one said, I'm out. Then I said, my daughter's in. I said her name. And then I said, start praying. And just like a ripple effect of prayer just went out, because my siblings live in different states. They're part of different prayer groups. I mean, we probably had hundreds of people praying for us at that point.
No doubt.
Which was huge. So then the coach and I we're in the woods, but we can see the hill. We can see the big field next to the hill. And we're like, okay, how many people are here with guns? Like, are people going to start coming out of the woods towards us? Or is there going to be like a gunfight in the parking lot? We don't know. And it's kind of a drop off on that side of the hill. And so the coach says, if they start coming out, I'm going to jump down this hill. And
it's practically a cliff.
It's a cliff.
Yes.
I'm going to jump down this cliff, and you throw the kids down at me. And I'm like, oh gosh, no. Like, my husband's going to be here, I promise you. So soon after him saying that, my husband flies past us. He gets up to the hill, parks. I call him, chew him out. Like, no, turn around. Like, come back here.
Like,
you gotta come
you
back.
asked me to come.
And he's like, oh, but I can't see you. And I was like, just stop when you see a guardrail. So he stops, and he said he couldn't see us at all. And we just started coming out of the woods. And my husband coaches hockey for one of the high school hockey teams. And so he always has tons of hockey gear in his car. The sticks are big. And so he jumps out of his car. He throws all this hockey gear into the woods. We start throwing the kids in. And then he goes, give me your keys. And I was like, no. And he's like, no, you drive. Give me the keys. I'm going to go in and get our daughter. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're not going in that building. And thankfully the coach was there, and he was like, dude, you cannot go in that building. And as soon as he said that, the first cop came up. And so that my husband got back in the car, and we got all the kids in. And then as we're starting to drive away, 2 more cop cars come flying up right behind the first one.
Okay.
We go down to the Burton Hills parking lot right there, and we just wait. And he starts asking, is our daughter okay? And I just realized at that point, if I tell him what's happening, he's going to rip the keys off my neck and probably run up that hill. So I just said, just keep praying. Just keep praying.
Yeah. I don't want to be careful here. There's been a lot of different responses by a lot of different people just in that moment that I know about. Again, I don't want to go any further than that. Was your husband armed?
No.
Okay.
I remember asking him that. I was like, did you bring anything? He had a hockey stick in his hand. I don't know. Just going to go in with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Not every parent that was there responded the same. You know, that it's all over the board. It's really interesting from a psychology standpoint for me. I just, to the career I chose and the way I'm wired, and Tom, we're wired like your husband. Like, if they're shooting at me, they're not shooting at kids.
Right.
So I'm okay with that.
Right.
Like, you know, Adam that works for me, and I've talked about this a lot, you know, he spent 20 years in the Army, 15 in special operations, 14 combat deployments. You know, it's a wonder he's still around. But even to this day, we, you know, like we've said, you know, like we have no desire to die early, but if we go down standing in the gap, you know, trying to protect somebody, I'm okay with that.
Right.
You know, and obviously your husband was okay with that too. I mean, that's, you know, some decisions that were made that day as far as positioning and where officers went and all that. A lot of it, you know, I don't want to go too far down that road. Just if bad guy turns out to be girl, but is shooting at me or shooting at the police, that's good, because that means they're not shooting
at the kids,
at teachers and kids or church members, or, you know, that's a good thing. It's hard to look at it that way sometimes, especially maybe if you're the one being shot at, but that is a good thing in that moment, in my opinion, just because it means, you know, most people don't do two tasks at once very well, especially in that moment. How do you, I don't guess, well, you would know, well, maybe not, how long it was from the time you called your husband to the time he pulled up there?
I don't know.
Okay.
No. I mean, it wasn't very long.
Yeah. I mean, we talked off there about
right
proximity and
got there
speed,
really
and
fast, yeah.
I mean, yeah, amen.
Well, he said, nobody's going to pull me over right now, so.
No, because I'm not stopping.
No.
Well, if they are, he's taking them to
Well,
the
that's what I'm
Right,
saying.
I'm taking them to the right place.
That's right.
That's
yeah.
right.
I'll lead you on a pursuit all the way to where we're going, then you can arrest me later.
Right.
But in the meantime, let's get there. So yeah, it would be come follow me kind of thing. But it turns out to be those cars you saw ended up not being. And that's interesting too. The ones that you saw come by you guys were they all marked? Like,
Yes,
okay,
they were marked.
Okay, because turns out that we talked about before that the first officer there was in an unmarked, but came up the other entrance.
Okay.
Which would have been Colazzo, but that was still 11 minutes.
Okay.
From her shooting her way in until Colazzo was on site was 11 minutes. So obviously, and we'll get to all that, but the cops, when they got there, they did a remarkable job. They set the tone. They set the example for the rest of the country of what it's supposed to look like.
Right.
Like when all these other ones have not.
Right.
They 100% set the example. So it was about 3 minutes and 15 seconds total from the time the first cop came in the door to the time they got to her. It gives us our total window of 14 minutes from shooters in the building to shooters no longer around, right? So I give them credit where credit's due, and obviously we've had one of them on. We're going to have another one on soon. But I think it's important to understand the credit also remarkably goes to you guys, because to break it down super plainly and super simple, for 14 minutes, it was the teachers versus the gunman. That's it. They did not interact with her until 14 minutes, and when they did, it ended. But there was no. I mean, prior. I'm not granted she was shooting at them from that second floor window, but okay. But as far as any sort of challenge to her assault. There was not a challenge to her assault for 14 minutes.
Right.
So,
and communication that's going out, that's all over the board. Who's it coming from? What are they seeing? You know,
Right.
which is one of our biggest pet peeves with schools right now, is having a set of eyes inside that is being able to relate outside. And I would like to unpack that later, but I want to get into this.
Yeah.
I want to go back to one thing you talked about, and you know, this full disclosure came from Adam, who's here in the background. But he sent me a text that I didn't see till we took a break, and it says this: phenomenal mindset. They continue to plan for a better situation, even though they evaded and were quote unquote safe. Right.
Right.
And he and I talked about that on the break, and I think back to give credit where credit's due. Like most of the civilian world is not wired to do that. Like, they would have checked the box. I'm out of the building. They would have checked the box, you know, and the fact that you guys continued to script and play out like, well, if this happens, then what? Well, if this happens, then what? It wasn't like you guys were just checked the box. Okay, now we're good. Like, you guys continued to plan. And like, for people like us that are wired that way already, that's impressive, because most of society is not. So the fact that you guys did that is another kudos to you guys, because it's big.
Well, and the coach and I both said, like, we didn't feel safe until we were finally in that car driving off that hill. Then we felt like, okay, now we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said you guys went down.
We went down the Burton Hills driveway.
Yep.
And we parked in just one of the office parking lots.
Got it. Okay.
Burton Hills.
Where you could see the entrance and see what was coming.
Yes.
And all the things.
And to our surprise, that's where all the emergency vehicles started coming and lining up as well.
Yep. Well, you know, I don't, you probably know this, or when the helicopter was there real fast also, and they, them and some other people were calling out her location that she was shooting at them, and the audience doesn't necessarily know, so we'll kind of circle back on all this in a minute.
Okay.
But towards the end of the attack, the shooter took an elevated position, ambush site, and started shooting at the officers and pinning them down behind their police cars, very accurately, actually. And so somebody made the call to block the road because she was, you know, shooting at officers. I wasn't there. You know, I again, that's where my brain goes back to. Well, good. If they're shooting at us, they're not like shooting at, like, let's give them lots of guns to shoot at, you know. But because of that, it caused, you know, a ripple effect of emergency vehicles having access and all the things, medical transports, all that. And just so you know, and the audience knows, like, well, let me back up. Let's kind of unpack, and I know you know because you were there, and I know because of what our relationship, but of kind of what happened. I don't want to get into anything about your kid, obviously, specifics, but are you okay with talking about kind of what happened up there, or do you want me to just kind of unpack that, like with those classrooms that you were talking about that were being shot into?
I'm fine with you talking about that. I assume you'll do it in a generic.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So as you mentioned, the fire alarm went off, which caused confusion.
Right.
And even in that emergency text thread that you guys used, it caused confusion.
Right.
And so the 2 third grade classrooms, based on where they're located, for people that don't know, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of that either because it doesn't matter, but based on where they were located, they were upstairs, not on the first floor, and far enough that they didn't hear gunshots.
Right.
They heard unscheduled fire alarm.
Right.
And it's almost a game, right? Like, how fast can you line up and evacuate? And so that's what they did. And the stairwell that's closest to their classroom where they go to evacuate, just of all the stairwells in that building, just happened to be the same stairwell that the shooter was coming up. So that's how the kids ended up right in front of the gunman. And just so you know, I think I told you, Tracy and I walked the crime scene the hardest one I've done for sure. But based on evidence, we'll just leave it there. That that stairwell. Well, the shooter was on the halfway landing.
Yeah.
Right. So there's like you don't have a chance. I don't care who you are. You're 7 feet away. As soon as you open the door, you got nothing.
Right.
But that hallway, behind Will, Hallie, and Evelyn, was loaded with other third graders.
Right. There were 9 other students behind them.
Yeah. And but there weren't any teachers in the hall yet, right?
Just the substitute teacher who.
Well, no, I'll get to that.
Okay.
I don't know if you know where she was coming from. So there were no teachers in the hallway from the classrooms that were evacuating. It's fair to say. Because, right, you're a teacher. The teacher's role is the caboose. Like, you can't leave your classroom until you confirm all your kids.
It's clear.
Yeah.
Right.
Cindy ended up right there with them. And, there's no camera footage down there because, the school. But because the building, and I won't be giving anything away, but there's a camera near the office.
Yes, that looks down.
Yep.
That hall.
So I don't go any further than that, but which one I'm talking about. As soon as Cindy goes through those doors, leaving the office to turn left to go down there, those doors close.
Right.
Fire doors, smoke doors. So we know, okay, that's when the fire alarm went off. And from being there that there's 2 other sets of doors.
Right.
Smoke doors.
Right. So I thought the fire alarm going off would be a good thing because I thought it would slow this person down.
Yeah.
And they would get shut in downstairs where there's no active classes. It's just church nurseries that we don't use during the week.
Right. So when Cindy goes through that first set of doors, they're open. She turns left, and then there's 2 more. Mm-hmm. So we think, based on just evidence, what more than likely happened is when Cindy got through that last set of doors at the end of that hall right there, she comes through there and sees the whole class out in the hall, no teachers, fire alarm going off. Well, what is every teacher going to do? Stop and help.
Right.
Yeah, you have the heart of a teacher. Right. So just so the audience understands that Cindy and the 3 kids were all killed together. They were together, very, 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 very close to each other. So from there, she goes to the first 3rd grade classroom, and which is your child's room, and their teacher talked to her obviously very extensively about all this. She said that she heard it, knew what it was.
Right.
Immediately pulled her door closed, got her door locked, and was getting her window covering down. And by the way, anybody listening to this that either works in a school or your child goes to a school, if your teachers don't have something on their door, near their door, all the time to take vision away from bad people during bad events, that needs to change like today. Like you have to take their vision away. But her story is interesting because she said, I was reaching for those straps and saw a motion in front of her, and she looks down and she's face to face with the gunman, like through her door. And she got her window covering down and jumps out of the way. And then. Well,
and I will say too, it's a church, not a school. So the windows on those doors are.
Yeah. Let's not get into.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. So, but she got her window covering down, and then the shooter dumped an entire magazine. And sprayed that. It wasn't just through the door. They sprayed as much of that room.
Yeah.
That they could see.
Yep.
That was in sight.
Well,
to your point of vision.
They couldn't see anything. She was just spraying blind. Now, the door next to it, she then reloads and does the same thing to the next 3rd grade classroom. And I think this. That teacher did not have time to get her window covering down during the event. And same thing. And as you know, and I won't get into more detail, but took a very deliberate shot at a child in that room that did survive, got injured, but did survive. And then reloads again. And then I think you probably know the route. Well, you do because you sat through this the other day.
Right.
So people, at this point, we're 2 minutes in, and we're On the second floor, magazine number 4 now, right?
Okay.
That she's
Just
put
reloaded.
in. 5 people are down. And then, the route she takes, I don't want to get into it, but you know, and ends up face to face with Katherine. And people ask about like how, when they see the floor plan diagram, how could Katherine be in her office, all that happened where it did, and her not hear it?
Well, there's multiple doors that are shut.
Yep. I mean, and the fire alarm's going off. I mean, so it's
very loud.
Yep. You got that, and you got the door shut, and it's like, how in the world? Well, that's how. You don't. I mean, that's why we do it. It's back to what you said in the very beginning. Like, it does not sound like people expect, or they think it will. And all the classrooms right there, but specifically Rob, I've talked to a lot. Beth, some other ones, but I won't say their last names, but just said that they all heard the same thing. Just, what are you doing? Followed by gunshots. And at this point now, Katherine's down and we're under 3 minutes.
Wow. And
it's like, okay. But at that point, and it's evident in your emergency group stuff that it very quickly,
people catch on what's going on.
Yep.
And they jump into action.
And did I mean, one of two things, right? Like either evaded or fortified. I mean, just like depending on
where they were.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of you're not in this world, but there's a lot of debate in our industry about options based trainings versus no, just tell me what to do. I obviously I'm an options based guy. Like my goal with every training we do, including yours, is I'm going to give you tools to make decisions for yourself in the moment, because there is no one broad brush answer. And it's the same with what Tom does. Sometimes people want that, but it has to be done a certain way. You can't overwhelm people with 8 million options, because you're never going to remember it, a year from now under stress.
Well, and I will say that like the plan I had in my mind completely changed in the moment, because the other teacher that I worked with and we came from a different preschool, and we had a retired Metro officer there, and he would teach us like run, hide, or fight. But he would come to our classrooms and say, okay, where are you going to run? And you'd be like, oh, I'm going to run behind that SUV. And he's like, no, that's not going to be here tomorrow. Where are you going to run? I'd be like, oh, behind that air conditioner. He's like, nope, not going to stop a bullet. Where are you going to run? And finally, after years of teaching there, it was like, okay, you got to get behind a wall. So that teacher and I made the decision, if we ever had to run, we'd go behind the wall, down the big hill, through the woods, take a ride on Hillsborough, and end up in the Burton Hills parking lot. So I always knew I was going to the Burton Hills parking lot.
Yeah.
I just got there a different way.
Yep.
And it all changed in the moment. So you just have to constantly be.
Yeah, there's no way to predict that you have to be trained and equipped with options and a thought process through it rather than an exact instruction.
Yeah.
Well, I love that y'all had a plan before we ever did your training. Like that
before you ever came.
That you scripted it. Obviously, you probably remember we showed you the aerial shot to talk about all those things, like where we're going, why, and where we don't. But the fact that y'all had already been there, done that, I love. I mean, again, kudos to y'all, but kudos to that retired officer too for constantly, without scaring you, but like
just like
empowering you, equipping you.
What are you going to do? Yeah,
that's right.
Make a decision today.
Make yourself script through that situation. So, we're coming up on 3 minutes in, and the damage is done. So it turns out that law enforcement is dispatched at 10:14:24. So by the time they were dispatched, damage was done.
It's done.
Yep. But that's also when you guys were getting word to each other, and there were classes, as you know, that were on the playground. There were classes that were halfway in the building, halfway out, and had to make decisions on the fly in the moment. Once you guys realized what was happening, I mean, you crushed it. I mean, the proof is in the results, right? I mean, like, she was in that building an additional 11 minutes after that.
Right.
Nobody. You brought up the fire alarm earlier and how you were hoping it would change things, contain her.
Right.
I will tell you this, without getting into too much detail. It did change her plan. And I know that for a fact, because she had specific plans. I better just leave that there. Very specific plans of where, when, all the things laid out, and it was completely abandoned. And I'm convinced the reason that she abandoned the plan was because she was not ready for the fire alarm to go off. And I think it made her panic and changed the plan very quickly, which I think ended up helping, if I'm being honest, because most people don't perform well under stress, good or bad. The good guys train to perform well under stress, bad guys don't. And it's evident too, and a lot of people have seen the body cam footage and more importantly, the surveillance footage. When you first see a lot of these people moving through the building, they're amped up, they're super tactical looking and all this other stuff, and they're on edge. But then several minutes in, that wears off, and they get really lax and just kind of start moseying around. And like she started shooting those TVs in the hall outside Fellowship Hall, just kind of random walking and bang bang. Just what are you doing that for?
I know.
But that's the reality. Is it does start to wear off. So in that sense, I think the fire alarm did help because it put her under more stress.
And I will say, I think the fire alarm helped too, because there wasn't a child in the bathroom or out in the hall. Because of the alarm, they would have all gone back into their homerooms.
Yep. So, we talked on air and off air about a lot of God things happened that day. That she happened to be right under that smoke detector.
Right.
When she came in and fired at Mike. I mean, just 5 more feet even, and probably not set off the fire alarm.
And she could have just snuck around that building and who knows what.
That's right. And so it could have been obviously a very different outcome. So how many would you say, I've got a rough idea, but I mean, obviously turnover happens in schools. I mean, it's just what it is. But I know a lot of you guys that did work there are other places now. How many would you say that is that are like other?
I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah.
It'd take me a minute to think of that.
Yeah, and not all necessarily because of this. I mean, it's just life.
Just
and
people move or
I talked to Christina the other day, and she's out of town now.
Right.
But her story's interesting too, about being out in Hillsborough Road.
Outside.
Yeah. Well, and just the decisions she made. She paused at that corner, where it is on the backside of the sanctuary, and waited till she heard a break in the shots and felt like that was probably a reload.
Okay.
And then took them across that little short open you have to get to this, and then went out into Hillsborough Road, and people are like, oh, you can't run on the road. Well, yes, you can. This is the South. You're going to get help, whether you want it or not.
It's stop if you have a bunch of kids with you.
And like every third car has a gun in it.
Right.
I mean, sorry, it's Tennessee. It's just like you're gonna get help. So a lot of really awesome decisions were made that day. Obviously, still tragic. I mean, we're never gonna replace those lives lost, and I won't get into who on the show, but that my connection to more than one family, and it's still a heavy lift for them and for everybody, but. I think people understanding that everyday people can make good decisions under stress if they just do a little bit. Get your head out of your phone, not walk around as paranoid as Tom and I are. Probably, I don't think everybody would want to be in our head. You'd walk around with a rifle all day, probably, if you were. But I think there's obviously something that can be done, and the time gap is the contributing factor here. That there always is one, and what are we doing in that time gap until the good guys can get there? At what point, I want to circle back to that day. You're with your husband and your students in the Burton Hills parking lot, and you got obviously a massive prayer team going, which is epic. How long was it before you were notified that your child was safe?
So I didn't find out that my child was safe until later that afternoon in the reunification center.
Okay.
But I did get a text from my mom in that parking lot. I guess she came up to one of the police officers setting the barrier, and I guess she started yelling at him, like, what's going on? She's like, just tell me one thing. Is the shooter dead? And he said yes. And so I got a text from her soon after that it was over. So I knew whatever had happened. Like nothing more was going to happen, but whatever it was had happened. And I didn't know if any of the third graders were going to walk out of that building. I remember watching the ambulances go up and trying to count how many were coming down. I remember the coach just kept praying out loud, like, please not a whole class, please not a whole class. So we didn't know if they were going to come out.
Yeah. And then at what, do you remember how many ambulances you counted?
I remember telling my husband, was that 6 or 7?
Okay.
And he was like, what does it matter? Like, is our daughter okay? Like, just tell me. So.
Well, but you're trying to assess the whole level of damage. I mean, that's the teacher in you. All those kids in your building are important to you. Like,
and trying to keep the kids in the car calm, because at this point they think it's a fire drill. So we're just watching the community helpers show up, and oh wow, look, there's a man and like a SWAT guy and a fireman, and so for the little boys in the car, it was kind of cool. Yeah, for them.
Well, the fact that you were remaining calm and making it cool, again, that's just the fact that you had the wherewithal to do that, even though you didn't know.
Right.
That's incredible.
That's a servant.
Well, because I was thinking too, like, it's not only about saving them physically, but saving them like mentally. Like, if they don't know what's going on, then they don't have to fear about this in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, it's remarkable, because I don't know if I'd have been able to do that.
Well, and I will say my husband was a big help in that too, because he was like trying to crack jokes with them and like, oh, what's your name? You know? So.
And you had 6 of them with you?
6 of them in the car with us and the coach.
And all the hockey gear tossed in the woods?
That's in the woods at this point, yeah. We went back to get that later, and the officer at the bottom of the hill was like, why did you throw all this stuff in there?
Yeah, make room. No, that's incredible. At what point did you guys move? Like, how long do you think you were at Burton Hills before you moved down to the church, the reunification?
I think so there were a couple different fire trucks there, and when I found out that it was over, and then I think kindergarten came first, which would make sense because they were outside of the building, I told my husband, hey, you need to go over to the fire station because I think they're going to take kids there and not here. And so leave me here with the firemen and the police officers, and you try to get over to that other side of the hill to see if you could find her. And he wasn't able to get around to that side.
Did you ever, in any of this point, go back and look at the emergency text thread?
I have, yeah.
No, like that day?
No, not that day.
During, okay.
Well, no, that's not true. Well, just whenever she said she was shooting.
Yeah.
But I wasn't on it. I was, when we got to the parking lot, I have an app on my phone that I'm able to text parents from. And for some reason that day, it would not open and load for me. And I was trying to get a hold of the kids in my car to tell their parents, like, hey, something's happening at the school. Police have responded. I have the kids. We're in the Burton Hills parking lot. Come here.
Okay.
But I couldn't open that app for whatever reason. And so I remember asking the kids, like, does anybody know their mom's phone number? And then I realized I do know somebody's mom's phone number, and it was the coach. And so I was able to text his mom in the middle of the event just to say he's safe with me.
Okay. Yeah. Who we won't say who, but is another teacher. Yeah. At the school. So that's okay. So eventually did an officer move you guys to reunification, or?
Yes.
Okay.
So eventually we started to hear word that they're going to bus us to Woodmont, to a reunification center. So I was texting my husband, like, hey, if you can't get there, just come to this church. I think they're going to take everybody there.
Okay. And did you go on a bus?
We got on a bus.
Okay.
Yeah. Got on a bus with teachers, kids. There were a few parents that got on with us.
Yeah, you're not going to stop the parents if they're there. I mean, you forget it.
They were getting in. And so I remember looking back at one of the teachers and asking if he had seen his son yet, who I knew was upstairs as well. And he said no. And I said, yeah, I haven't seen my daughter. And then one of the other little girls said, I saw her running through the woods. So I texted my family and said, there's a kid in here that says she was in the woods. I hope so. Like, keep praying.
Yeah.
So I was hopeful, but I wasn't 100% sure because, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. How long do you think you guys were at reunification before you? I mean, because you're pulling double duty back to like you've been doing this whole time, right? You're trying to be teacher and keep kids calm and get to parents, but also be a parent yourself at the same time.
And for me, it was like I just started to focus on the mission, which was hand these kids back to their parents so that I can go find my kid.
Yeah.
And I remember like one of the little girls was like, my dad works in this office. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm sure he does. Well, sure enough, he came down. So I was able to give him to her or give her to him.
Oh, at the church?
At the Burton Hills
Oh.
parking lot.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
And so
Okay.
I told him like, hey, can you tell your wife to text all the moms that all the 4-year-olds are safe? Like we're here, we're safe. But then we ended up having to all get on the bus anyway.
Sure.
To go to the reunification. So we got bused to the reunification center, and I think the preschool got off the buses first, 5th and 6th grade, and for whatever reason, like the 3rd grade was the last class that came through that basement that day, and my child was the last one to walk in.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
You remember what time it was?
No, but shortly after she came, I remember the littler kids, the 3-year-olds, started to fall asleep, and we were like, oh, it's nap time. So it was like 12:31 in there.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, relatively efficient if we're talking,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's pretty
Yeah.
quick for all that to happen with
Right.
all the moving parts. And then, of course, fighting, just fighting traffic in and out, right? For responders, for you guys, you know where the school's located and you know where the church is located and and what's in between the two.
Yes, no. It's awful.
You're just asking for a lot of traffic problems. And so you obviously you saw your daughter come through, but at this point, is there any talk about, who's unaccounted
Who's
for?
missing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we knew through the messages that there were 3 kids that weren't in their classroom. So to me, I thought, oh, they're in the library, they're in learning services, they're in some other classroom.
Yeah.
I don't think I put the pieces together that it was a bad situation until my daughter came and I said, well, where's so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so? And she's like, I don't know. And then I finally said, well, where were they when the fire alarm went off? And she was like, oh, well, sitting right next to me. So that's when it hit me that, oh gosh, this is bad.
Yeah. You guys obviously finally got, you remember what time you got to leave? And go try and.
I think it was like 3 or 4 in the afternoon.
Okay.
It was later.
Did you guys just go home? You remember?
Yeah. So first we gave the kids to their parents. And so we did that handoff. And then my daughter got called. So I handed her to my husband. He took her home. And then he came back for me later in the afternoon.
Okay.
They went in age order, youngest to oldest.
Sure.
So it took a while.
Yeah.
And then they took all the teachers up into the sanctuary. And then that's when we finally found out who wasn't with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who did that? Who talked to you guys?
I think it was someone on the board. I can't remember.
Okay.
That part's foggy for me.
Well, sure. We talked to an officer on here that's going to come back on and talk about kind of afterwards, right? For him. And I think that's an important piece to hit. In our training, we talk about mental trauma and how understanding it and dealing with it and having a plan for it is just as important as everything we've talked about in the training of having a plan to face your worst day, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's a big piece of it. And trying to go from an environment like that to dinner or at home, your brain is just not gonna it's not gonna work.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we were there for a couple of days, and then you probably know this, but it was a fog for me too. But we were getting y'all's cars back down, so y'all didn't have to come back up to the hill to come.
Right.
And for the audience to understand, they all their vehicles were in a crime scene, right? That whole campus was a crime scene, and so
your purse, your wallet,
all your stuff.
you've got nothing. Yeah.
I ended up getting somebody's phone, and I had to text and say, whose phone is this? And I don't remember who it was now. I can find it. But just to get your stuff back to whatever we could down the hill without you having to come back up there and see anything. We just, for obvious reasons. So, but obviously I didn't get a chance to talk to you guys until the Monday after, at the, at the church. But, I think it's probably, well, you tell me, what the days after, foggy, clear?
Foggy, very surreal. Yeah. Almost like, did that really happen? And then of course you have the survivor's guilt, not only yourself as a teacher and the other teachers that you lost, but then yourself as a parent. It's hard to understand because, this miraculous thing happened that these kids survived, but then you have the 3 parents who didn't get their kids home. And it's it just doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel right. So it's really hard to just come to terms with that.
Sure. Probably still, right?
Yeah. Still.
Tracy was with me in Memphis and we weren't done. We were doing an assessment of a school. They had 2 campuses. We can't leave. We got to finish. They'll understand if we leave, but we came here to conduct a service for them. There's nothing we can change back there. Let's finish it. And she's she said, I felt terrible. Same kind of thing. Cause she's all I wanted to do was get home to my kids. And then immediately I thought, well, wait a minute, that's not fair because there are people who don't get their,
right.
And so it's, neither one of those is wrong. Right. But yeah, I know it's real. And I've talked to other people, survivor's guilt's real, just from any event, this event too. There's other people we've talked about, not on here, but just, it's a thing and it's okay.
Right.
It's to be expected, I think. But if there's another, person that went through this event or another traumatic event listening, which there will be, because the amount of people that have gone through some sort of mental trauma in their life is remarkably high. That's just reality. If you have one piece of advice for them that you think would help, what would it be?
Just to pray. Through it all, it's it was so scary, but yet there was this peace about it. It was just the Holy Spirit was there with us the whole time. And
that's remarkable too, right? Because you wouldn't feel that if that was,
right.
In that moment,
right,
with that much terror and trauma and emotion and anger and all the things you're feeling, to also feel a sense of peace is only explainable one way,
right?
I think so. Yeah, obviously your faith is strong. And that's humongous, and certainly a big piece of. I don't believe in accidents,
right?
I don't believe in accidents at all. I know you stay in touch with some, and who and why, it doesn't matter. We're not going to get into all that, but everybody's experiences too is a little different too. When you talk to, I've talked to a lot of you guys, not just teachers, parents, family members of people that died that day.
Friends.
Yep. And it's all over the place, and none of it's wrong. There's disagreements over things, and there's fractured relationships. And I went to well, obviously you did too, the Sandy Hook, and that was some of the. For the audience, there was a Sandy Hook mom who has a nonprofit that came to town to meet with you guys and talk about what to expect and what's normal and all those things. And some of the best advice I heard from her was that you guys are going to adamantly disagree about things and probably lose friendships, and neither one of you are wrong,
right?
Because
and it's trauma, and it affects everyone differently, and everyone's going to heal the way they need to heal. And I think once you come to terms with that, and you let that go, it's the most healing thing for you.
Yeah, no doubt. Is there anything we haven't covered that you think you want to talk about?
Can't think of anything.
Well, I wanted to obviously give any of y'all. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you and I talked about when we stopped, we began with you deciding to be a teacher, going through. I was a former teacher. These weren't the things we went into it for.
Right.
We didn't. You're not prepared for that. And through all your training to get your certification and education to be a teacher,
this was not part of it.
This is never mentioned.
No.
And really, nor should it. emergency response maybe a little bit, but it's really not. But you had training prior to the event that was independent from your school, paid for. What advice do you have for teachers? Because a lot of, we hear, I don't want to go through all this. I'm here to teach kids.
Right.
And as teachers, I understand as well, where you're coming from as a teacher, we're teaching more than curriculum.
Right.
When we're there. Do you have any words on that as far as training and why you should train, you shouldn't train?
Well, you should absolutely train if you have the opportunity to. And I would just say pay attention, because it could save your life one day.
Whether it's at school or
right,
just
whether
out
it's at
in the
school
public.
Or you're at the grocery store. Like, you think it definitely changes your perspective on that. Like, you don't go to a restaurant the same way anymore. You don't go to church and sit in the same place you used to. You change everything.
Yeah. And as everybody, you wear multiple hats.
Right.
That day, you had both hats on.
Right.
At the same place with the same circumstances, which kudos to you. I'm still struggling with that from earlier in the conversation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's impressive. I don't know that I've been able to process both, but I've never been a teacher. I mean, obviously I teach for a living now, but not like y'all do, not kids.
Right.
I started the company because I believe in the mission, and I believe in what the research tells us, and that is that there is something that can be done, and there is a gap in there, and there are tools that you can give people, and we prepare people to face their worst day. And, now we've had a group face their worst day, which, I mean, did I know it would come eventually? Sure, because of our company growth. If you'd have told me it was going to be that little school up on the hill, I said, no way,
Right. Why would anybody want to go there? Yeah.
100%. But obviously, everybody knows, this stuff happens anywhere and everywhere, and we don't fearmonger. I mean, that's not what we do. And do I want people paying attention? Yeah. Do I want you to evaluate where you sit in church? Yes. But not walk around paranoid and fearful, just empowered with a little bit of knowledge to help yourself, There's a reason our tagline is we empower you to save lives, including your own. It's what's got to be done. And you guys did, and y'all are a special group of people. I mean, I think I told you off air, but a big part of what we do with y'all is medical. And you guys all had trauma kits in your classrooms. But y'all didn't keep them out on the desk. I mean, you had them in cabinets.
Right.
But when I walked that crime scene, I can't tell you the number of trauma kits that were out in those rooms. And that's what I'm saying. You guys are teachers. You're not cops. You're not paramedics. The fact that y'all went through all that and then still got your trauma kits out ready to, that's impressive. I mean, it's y'all are a special group of people. I mean,
we also commented with each other at the reunification center, like, we didn't have to use the second half of the training.
Yeah. Yeah. Good and bad, I guess, right? But I think just for you to know and that they weren't treatable.
Right.
So that's,
tell me that.
Yeah, I think it's important to know. But understand the thought process there.
I just meant from the sense of there weren't more injured.
Oh,
correct.
Yeah.
People, like, that's usually not how these things seem to turn out. At least not in your training. There's usually
that's right.
more injured people.
Yep. Well, there weren't because of y'all.
Right.
So, I mean, and obviously the good guys handling business, but I just was so impressed by that too. Like, okay, it's all these things that, like, I'm in these classrooms and I'm processing what I'm seeing or trying to process sippy cups and bullet holes. I shouldn't be, I still have trouble with that. But through all that, because y'all experienced it live and firsthand, you still had the wherewithal to get trauma kits out and do all the things that needed to be done and still be a nurturer and heart of a teacher and a mom and like all those things. It's impressive. I mean, you guys are a special group of people. And, obviously I love that I got an opportunity to get to know you guys and beforehand and do all the stuff we did. I mean, I hate, to be honest with you, the way I know you guys now. But I'm also happy to it does my soul good to be around you guys. I mean, obviously you remember, I'm sure, when y'all went to the secondary location, I was just popping in like I wasn't asking. I was just showing up. I was walking in classrooms. It just did my soul good to be around you guys after that. So, y'all are an awesome group of people. And I know you, because we talked for a while about you coming to do this, and I know the struggle there. I really appreciate it. I think it'll be really helpful for more people to hear about different experiences from that day and the aftermath and advice on how to deal with that. And, and understand that no matter how you feel, it's not wrong.
Right.
Like there is no,
right. Nobody's making a bad choice. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Well, thanks. I think this is going to be really helpful to a lot of people. And I'm not surprised that you stepped up and did this because of what I know about you. But I'm honored that you did. And I think, and I speak for Tom too, when we say that we mean it from the bottom of our hearts, that this whole series, I hope, will help in the healing process and the healing journey for a lot of people.
I hope so. That's my hope, or just help people if they are unfortunately in this situation themselves.
Yeah. Amen.
But thank you. And like I said, I owe everything to you and, and ultimately to Katherine. I mean, shout out to her. She saved us.
Yeah. Yeah. She, you know how she was. And so, it's funny. She wasn't going to put this in front of y'all without seeing it first. I mean, she was, I don't want to say control freak, but she was. I mean, in a good way. Definitely like that dedicated to her people and what you do every day and figuring it out. And just like I think it was off air, I told you she sat through the training and said, I don't know how we're going to pay for this or when we're going to do it, but it's too important not to do it. And she made the decision on the spot that it was going to happen. And you know her, there's no telling her no.
No.
Like she would have figured it out. So yeah, definitely kudos to her for making that decision and pushing hard and making it happen. And obviously I'm honored that it was us that she ultimately decided to bring in, but regardless of who it was, the fact that she was willing to do it and was adamant about it, obviously made a huge difference. And, she was a special lady. So, they all were, I mean, but, yeah, I wouldn't have been in there with you guys without her, no doubt. Huge shout out to her. So on that note, before I fall apart again, we probably ought to wrap this up, but, I appreciate you coming. We appreciate you guys listening. We hope this is helpful. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, by all means, you can reach out to us at info@defensesystems.com. And, if you have any ideas, if you will, around this series or other things you want to hear about or don't want to hear about, then by all means, let us know that too. But I hope this has been helpful, and we appreciate you guys listening to this edition of Tips, Tactics, and Tools for a Safer Tomorrow.
I'm out.